Racist cop kicks black woman in court, then freezes when she turns out to be his new police chief. The courtroom was silent until one officer decided he was above the law. He smirked, leaned down, and with a cruel shove of his boot, kicked the chair of a black woman who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Gasps echoed across the room. She lowered her eyes, holding back the pain, but inside, she was stronger than he could ever imagine. The officer thought it was just another display of his power. He thought he could humiliate her and walk away smiling. But in just a few minutes, this unknown woman would rise to a position that would shatter his arrogance forever. And when the truth came out, the look on his face left the entire courtroom frozen. It was supposed to be just another routine hearing inside the county courthouse. Officers lined the walls, lawyers whispered over paperwork, and the air carried the heavy silence of judgment. Among the crowd sat a black woman, quiet, composed, and unbothered by the stares that followed her as she entered the room. She wasn't a defendant. She wasn't even on trial. She was simply there, seated calmly, observing like any other citizen. But one officer noticed her differently. His eyes lingered, sharp and cold, scanning her as though her very presence was an intrusion. He didn't know her name, didn't care to. In his mind, she was just another face that didn't belong in his courtroom. This wasn't the first time he'd shown his colors. Colleagues had grown used to his muttered remarks, the way he carried himself with a smirk that dripped with arrogance. He was the kind of man who thought the badge gave him power, not to protect, but to intimidate. And on this day, in front of lawyers, judges, and the public, his arrogance would boil over. He didn't see a professional. He didn't see a leader. He didn't even see a human being with dignity. To him, she was just someone to target. The room carried on, unaware that within minutes, an act of cruelty was about to stain the walls of justice. What no one knew, not the judge, not the jury, not even the officer himself, was that the woman he dismissed so easily would soon have the power to decide his future. The tension started quietly, like a storm gathering behind closed doors. The officer leaned against the side wall, arms folded, his eyes fixed on the black woman who sat silently near the front row. Every few seconds, he shifted his stance, his stare burning holes through her composure. She kept her head high, refusing to shrink, but she could feel it, the weight of someone's hatred pressing against her. Whispers began to ripple through the courtroom as the officer finally pushed himself forward. His boots echoed against the tile floor. He approached her seat with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who believed no one would ever question his authority. Then it happened. Without a word, without hesitation, he kicked the leg of her chair. The force jolted her body forward, nearly knocking her to the ground. Gasps filled the courtroom. A few people rose from their seats, shocked, but no one moved to stop him. Judges looked away. Lawyers buried themselves in papers. Silence became the loudest sound in the room. "Get out of here!" he barked, pointing toward the door, as though she were a criminal trespassing in a place meant only for him. His finger, sharp and commanding, hovered inches from her face. He expected fear. He expected obedience. But she didn't flinch. She straightened her back, her eyes steady, her breathing calm. The officer's smirk deepened, mistaking her silence for weakness. He pressed harder, shoving at her chair again, sending papers fluttering from the bench nearby. Every second dragged, stretching the humiliation longer, heavier. The crowd looked on, some horrified, some unwilling to intervene. The woman's dignity stood against the crushing force of his cruelty, but inside, her heart pounded. She wasn't just enduring an attack. She was weighing a choice to reveal who she truly was now, or to let him hang himself deeper with his own arrogance. The officer sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "People like you don't belong here." His words cut through the courtroom like knives, searing the air with venom. No one spoke, No one defended her. The system in that moment stood still. And yet, so did she. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was patience, because the moment was coming. And when it arrived, this officer would realize that the woman he tried to humiliate was not only stronger than he ever imagined, she was his future. The room froze. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The officer's finger still hovered, near her face, his boot planted firmly where he had struck her chair. He expected fear, submission. Instead, the woman rose slowly from her seat. Every eye in the courtroom followed her movement, the weight of silence growing heavier with each step she took forward. Her voice was calm, steady, but sharp enough to cut the tension in the room. "Are you finished, officer?" The man blinked, confused. He wasn't used to being challenged. "What did you say?" he barked, his tone rising. She looked him dead in the eyes, unflinching. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small black folder, the kind reserved for official use. She laid it flat on the table, flipped it open, and revealed the gold badge that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Gasps erupted through the courtroom like thunder. The officer's smirk faltered. His hand dropped. His face drained of color. "I think," she said firmly, her words echoing with authority, "you've just assaulted your new commanding officer." The silence shattered. The judge's gavel slammed against the bench, but even that sound couldn't drown out the collective shock of the crowd. Lawyers whispered, clerks leaned in, and the entire courtroom seemed to lean forward, waiting for what would happen next. The officer stumbled back, his arrogance collapsing under the crushing weight of truth. His finger, once so commanding, now trembled as he tried to form words. You're the—" "Yes," she cut him off, her voice sharp as steel. "I am the new chief of police, and what you've just done will not be forgotten." The air felt electric. No one dared breathe too loud. The man who had tried to humiliate her stood exposed, trembling before the very woman he thought powerless. And in that moment, every person in the courtroom understood. The tables had turned. The courtroom, still buzzing from the shocking revelation, felt transformed. The same people who had watched silently as the officer tried to belittle her now looked at her with awe and respect. She stood tall, not just as a victim, but as a leader, a reminder that dignity cannot be stolen, no matter how hard hatred tries. The officer, once so confident in his power, now stood cornered by his own actions. For the first time, he tasted the same fear he had so easily inflicted on others. The whispers around him grew louder. "That's the chief. He struck the chief." His career, his reputation, everything he thought untouchable, crumbled in an instant. But the chief didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Instead, she delivered a line that would be remembered far beyond those walls. "You thought my skin made me weaker, but today, it only showed the world your weakness." The judge leaned forward, his gavel resting on the bench, eyes heavy with the weight of justice. The case would continue, but no one in that room doubted the outcome anymore. The real judgment had already been passed, by truth, by courage, by the simple power of standing tall against hate. Outside the courthouse, the story spread quickly. To many, she became more than just a chief. She was a symbol of strength in the face of prejudice. To others, a reminder that racism, when exposed, carries consequences. And for viewers like you, the question remains, how many moments like this go unseen? How many acts of racism are never challenged? Her story is not just about one courtroom. It's about every street, every workplace, every home where someone is silenced by hate. But silence is no longer an option. If you believe in justice, in dignity, and in the power of truth, share this story. Let it remind the world that racism doesn't just wound the victim, it destroys the soul of the one who carries it. Because sometimes, the most powerful justice is simply the truth. Revealed. Like and subscribe for more.